Sprout it from the rooftops, coming to you from Studio A here at Proven Winners ColorChoice Shrubs. It's time for the Gardening Simplified show with Stacey Hervella, me, Rick Weiss, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. All right, we're going to talk resolutions today. It's the new year. As a matter of fact, just check the countdown clock. Only 80 days, 11 hours, 57 minutes, and 19 seconds to spring. Yay.
Oh, I mean, come on.
Happy thought.
You know, I am not a big fan of winter, but I have to say there's something about being in the moment where you can't rush it to like a countdown level because, you know, that's actually kind of depressing.
Well, there are some people who think New Year's Day resolutions are depressing too. You could say they're not bubbly about it, and resolutions go in one year and out the other year, right?
True.
Yeah.
But it's the intention that counts.
There you go.
You set a resolution with a good intention to improve on something, to accomplish something, and whether or not you do it, I mean, it's not like you have an annual review at the end of the year where your boss comes by and, you know,
what are you going to do?
Gets you in
fired?
trouble.
Well, historically, the first recorded people to set New Year's pledges, later to be known as resolutions, were the ancient Babylonians, some 4,000 years ago. Now I sound like Cliff Clavin there on the sitcom Cheers. However, part of the reason they did it, Stacey, is because their calendar, the start of the calendar year was in March when everyone would be thinking about gardening. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Julius Caesar comes along and the calendar, now it's January 1st, and we're in the dead of winter when we have to make our resolutions. But we're going to try it. Because I see London, I see France, I see problems with your plants. We can always get better, and it's worth having some resolutions. Now, I know people whose New Year's resolution is to avoid people who make New Year's resolutions. However, or ask you what yours are, but we're going to do that today. So I have a variety of them personally. I know one right off the top that I'm going to do more of next year, and that is plant more annual grasses, not perennial grasses, but I love annual grasses. And why don't I plant more of them in spring? Well, because I'm so focused on the flowers and everything else. But I want to plant some more annual grasses, like graceful grasses. And I also want to make watering easier. Now, we've talked about this past year on the show and how much I dislike hoses and anything irrigation or plumbing, but somehow, some way, I've got to make irrigation easier. And then I'm going to try my hand at pollarding, another topic that we talked about this past year.
Right. Well, you know, I think every gardener who dislikes watering or whatever garden chore they strongly dislike owes it to themselves and their love of the practice to find a way to make it easier.
Yeah.
It really does make a huge difference. And I know when we were talking about hoses on a previous show this year, I had said that I have a hose cart. And that has been a life-changing thing. It's a lot easier to manage the hose. I don't dread watering as much. Now, fortunately, my husband still does it because he actually enjoys it. So that's the best thing you can do. But yeah, I mean, whatever your gardening dislike is, whether it's weeding or, you know, whatever, yeah, find a way to make it easier. That's a solid resolution.
Well, it brings up a point. Our show next week is going to be your resolutions for the new year. In other words, we want you to email us. You can go to our webpage, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, or Stacey, folks can reach out to us on Instagram, or for folks who watch us on YouTube, post your resolutions there for us.
Yeah, just leave it as a comment. Adriana looks at them all. If you got a question and she can't answer it, she reaches out to us and gets you an answer. So we do read all of those. So any of those is a perfectly legitimate way to share your resolutions. We won't follow up with you next December to see whether you did actually follow through on your resolution. So don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what you've got planned for 2024.
But we will share your resolutions on that first show in January 2024. Stacey, I've got to admit to you, I want to hear what your primary resolution is. But before we hear that, I want to share with you a biggie one for me. A biggie one. A biggie. See, that shows you how big it is.
Yeah.
My shed, my garden shed. My garden shed is like McGillicuddy's closet. It's always a mess because I want to be out there in the sunshine. I want to be working with the plant. I don't want to have to clean the garden shed. So I feel a resolution Lim-A-Rick coming on about my garden shed.
Ooh.
Here you go. I open the doors with a sense of dread, lost tools, and I'm seeing red. I hereby am resolved to finally have evolved and have a clean garden shed. I trip on a leaning rake, step on a pot that I break. I knock over the weed killer, bang my shins on the rototiller. I've got a tension headache. I'm tangled in a lawn chair, can't find my pruners anywhere. The charcoal briquette bag broke. My pitchfork gives me a poke, a horticultural funhouse nightmare. And yet you'll be happy to hear I'm out the door and of good cheer. While in there, looked around, and look at what I found. The trowel I lost last year. And here's the sad thing about that Lim-A-Rick. It is true.
It was very vivid, so I believe that.
It's vivid and it's true. I experience it. So I have to get the garden shed organized.
Well, you know what? Organization makes a huge difference because my tools are in the garage and also not super organized. And there is nothing worse than trying to deal with a bunch of garden tools all piled up, sharp, heavy stuff, and you're trying to pull one thing out and you're using one hand to hold it back to keep yourself from being injured. That's not fun. So yeah, it's absolutely worth investing in some organizational tools to make them easier to find so you don't get into that situation. And then, next year you can come up with a new resolution.
Although I do have to admit that it is fun when you feel you've lost something and then you find it.
Yeah, that just happened to us. My husband could have sworn we lost a pair of pruners. I thought, well, must have put them in a weed bucket and thrown them out. That's really too bad. I'm going to try not to sweat this. And then he found them in the basement.
Ah, nice.
We were very thrilled.
It's fun. It's like Christmas. So do you have a heavy hitter resolution for next year?
Well, I do. So I have a plan and I have a resolution. So the plan is to get our yard graded. When we moved in, our yard was a mess. It's only gotten worse. It's like, well, because the earth moves. Yeah.
The grade.
And it's not even just like the grade is wrong. It's just the grade is all over the place.
Okay.
There's high spots. There's low spots. It's like, mowing our lawn is like going for a hike up and down hill and rugged terrain. It's a problem. And so we want to get it graded and make some changes to the overall layout. So I'm going to resolve to do that. But the other thing that I need to do is I need to stop pretending that the reality of spring is the reality of the entire gardening season. Because what happens is in spring, I'm looking, there's plenty of space here. And then by the time, like July or August rolls around, those big old native perennials they grow are all, elbowing each other out. There's not enough room. And I sit there and go, I knew this was going to happen. Why didn't I move this in spring? Why didn't I divide it in spring? Why didn't I do something? Because I'm delusional. In spring, you're just like, everything's going to be great. I don't want to make any changes. So
I'm the same way.
It's a well-intentioned resolution that may or may not get kept, but at least I'm making it.
It'd be a great topic for our show sometime down the road is garden layering. I saw that there's a book out there also about layering. So the concept is to be able to add more plants to your landscape without adding to the breadth or the width of your landscape, the space that you're planting in. So layering might be a good thing also to look at as a resolution. Now, this past year, I accomplished adding some really nice garden paths. That was one of my resolutions. I accomplished it. The other one was going to be, I decide the condition of my garden, not the deer. And I built a deer compound complete with signs, and it's worked. And now I can grow more roses like I want to and more hydrangeas and that sort of thing. I'm going to take leaf mulching to the next level. I need more power. We'll be talking about that in the coming year. I got the comfortable pants for gardening, but now I want some shoes, some slip-ons that keep you clean. So easy in, easy out, but also do a good job of keeping you clean, keeping the dirt out. So I'm looking for those also as one of my resolutions. So it's fun to resolve, to maybe not necessarily be a better gardener, but to enjoy it more And there are some things that you can do, and we want to hear from you. What are your resolutions? Please let us know. Send your note, email us. Just go to our website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. And Stacey, we love to hear from people on YouTube and Instagram also.
Absolutely. And if you have a resolution, but you don't know how you're going to get there, then definitely reach out.
Yeah.
Maybe we can make some suggestions like the shed organization or the garden shoes.
We'll work it out. Plants on Trial coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. At this point in the show, we put a plant on trial, which is to say we're going to tell you about one of the 320 plus proven winners ColorChoice shrubs, and you get to decide if it's going to earn a spot in your garden, although today's plant on trial might not earn a spot in people's gardens just by virtue of the fact that it's not entirely hardy. But I'll get to that in a minute. It is appropriate for today's show because it is called Just Chill Red Tip Camellia, and I think that a lot of people could resolve to just chill a little bit more.
Perfect. Great resolution.
So
I like it.
That's where that comes from. Also, I like this one because it kind of, at the end of the year here, brought together a bunch of our recent shows, in that it is a broadleaf evergreen, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. And it is a relative of Camellia sinensis, which when we had Deborah Kanapke on, and she was talking about tea, that is the tea plant, Camellia sinensis. Now, this is not Camellia sinensis. This is it's a hybrid camellia. It is hardier. So one of the questions that I had asked Deborah when she was on was, is it true that the tea plant is not as hardy as a lot of the other camellias? And that is true. So proper tea, Camellia sinensis, is hardy probably to like zone 8, maybe even verging on zone 9.
Okay.
Whereas Just Chill Red Tip Camellia is hardy from USDA zone 7 through 9. And this is one of those situations where, again, going back to a previous show, 6B, zone 6B is in parentheses because it can grow in USDA zone 6B with protection, or if you put it in a protected spot.
This is exciting. I'm in parentheses because, yes, I moved from 6A to 6B. I'm going to give Just Chill Red Tip Camellia a try.
Yeah. Now, I have to confess, I am not generally the kind of gardener who just goes off the deep end for a single genus of plants, like where I'm just like, oh, I would join a plant society where we just devote ourselves to lilacs or roses or whatever. I have to say, if I lived in a milder climate, I would make a huge exception because I would go bananas for camellias. I am simply crazy about them.
I would too. I'm crazy about them. Now, from my reading, Stacey, they're not native to North America.
That's correct.
Am I correct?
Yep, they're all native to Asia.
As a matter of fact, I have a theory that with them native to Asia, I would think that along with tea, they kind of probably made their way to England or Europe and then eventually to the U.S. So we established that they're not native.
They are not native, but they are beautiful. And so there's two main types of camellias that we grow in North American gardens.
Okay.
So there's the fall blooming camellias, which are known very commonly in the South as Sasanqua, Sasanaqua, so long word there. Sasanqua camellias. Now, Just Chill Red Tip Camellia is not technically a Sasanqua. It's a hybrid, but it is a fall blooming camellia like a Sasanqua. And these tend to be hardier than the other common type in North American gardeners, which are the Camellia japonicas. Now, those are the kinds that start to bloom in the South in like February and go through late March. And those are just spectacular. You really don't want to get me started because that's where my zone envy really kicks in.
Same here. I've seen them in Arkansas, Alabama. Gorgeous.
And they have, I mean, the flowers really are the main attraction. And the flowers on Just Chill Red Tip are very beautiful. They're pink. They are a little bit smaller, and they're going to appear in roughly mid-fall and continue through early winter, whereas the japonicas are bigger. They're very ornate. They almost have the same thing that people love in dahlias, that really strong kind of geometric quality where the petals are arranged so tidy.
They are. And the cool thing, at least I've noticed with them, is that the petals don't fall off. Usually when they're done, the whole thing falls off.
Self-cleaning in that regard,
yeah.
And the colors of especially the Japanese camellias are so stunning. I mean, just rich and deep. And there's many multicolored ones. There's polka dotted ones. I love the ones that are kind of like swirly and tie-dye. Very polarizing. Most people don't like those, but they're my absolute favorite. But why am I talking about a plant that's not our plant on trial, Just Chill Red Tip? Because I do love camellias, and I have grown them successfully here in West Michigan. But you know what we talk about when we talk about these hardy fall blooming, so again, the Japanese type, definitely not hardy for us. There are a couple that kind of verge on hardiness, but the issue is that even if the plant survives, you're probably not going to get good flowering because it's still so cold here when they start to flower in late winter. So they don't really flower well. The buds, they get brown, they get frosted. And that happens like even in the South, if they get a sudden frost when their camellias are in bloom in February or March, they turn brown, but it doesn't usually, damage the plant. So Just Chill Red Tip is much hardier. And this is the type that I have grown successfully here. The flowers, again, they start in fall, so not when you expect it, and in a color you don't expect in fall, because they really are this like beautiful kind of baby pink. And most people think of fall as like burgundy and red and orange and these hot colors. And here comes Just Chill Red Tip blooming with this bright pink flower in October, and you're like, what is going on? And what happens sometimes in cooler climates like ours, so if you're trying to grow this in a 6B, you may find that if we get too early of a cold, you're not going to get good flowering. But the good news to that is that the foliage on this plant is so beautiful that it actually might be worth it to grow it and just consider the flowers a bonus, because not only do camellias have fabulous flowers, they have gorgeous foliage. It's thick, it's leathery, it's super glossy, and it's evergreen. So it's a broadleaf evergreen, like I said, bringing in another previous show recently. And they just look fantastic in the landscape. They're beautiful as a hedge because you get that year-round coverage. Really unexpected. And Just Chill Red Tip has an extra bonus, which is that when the new growth emerges, it's this beautiful deep burgundy color. So it really is just bringing so much interest and excitement into the garden that I'm willing to grow it, even if it doesn't flower, because we have had excellent survival on the Just Chill camellias here in our trial gardens in West Michigan.
Stacey, I think you just sold this plant. I know you've sold me, and if you're listening to our podcast, maybe you're in your car, you're listening to our show on radio, remember, you can get our show also on YouTube. Look for us, Gardening Simplified Show, and Adriana does a great job of dropping in pictures and information on the plants that we're talking about or what we're talking about. And of course, our website too, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. And you can get more information on this fabulous plant Stacey's talking about, Just Chill Red Tip Camellia. I have to say, Stacey, I'm sold.
And camellias are also shade tolerant. They're also deer resistant. So, I mean, to me, the list, it just goes on and on. Now, one thing you do need to know about them, they do want acidic soil. And this is very common for broadleaf evergreens, that they want acidic soil. It's just due to the areas where they are native. So not a great choice if you don't have acidic soil. They also really want the mythical moist but well-drained soil.
The elusive.
The mythical. The illusion. If it does indeed even exist. It does exist. But they are a plant that, it absolutely cannot tolerate wet soil. But if it gets too dry, the plant's really going to get stressed and not look its best. Now, they typically do very well in the South because of the humidity. So even if the summer is on the dry side, the high humidity means the plant is using less water and typically keeps it pretty healthy. And but wherever you are, this is a plant that really, really wants mulch. And just like we had last week, a question from someone who was asking about pine mulch. Is there anything more classic than seeing a camellia surrounded by pine mulch?
True.
That's like the symbol of like seeing a garden in the South.
Yeah, iconic. And what I love about camellias is the plant has a great history.
Yes.
It has a great history. And as you mentioned earlier, the flowers are similar to dahlias or let's say peonies, where you can get these knock your socks off blooms that you just wait for with great anticipation.
Yeah, and they bloom in February if you're growing a Japanese camellia and you're in the South. So, I mean, I'm just crazy about them. If you aren't familiar with them, definitely do take a look at our website or just Google them. And if you can't grow them, well, I guess you can always console yourself with a trip to a great garden, a great public garden in the South where you can enjoy them. But Just Chill Red Tip Camellia will be in garden centers starting this spring. So if you'd like to give it a try, or if they don't sell it nearby, you can order it mail order. And, you know, I always encourage, if you're pushing that hardiness zone, like you might be with Just Chill Red Tip Camellia, start it as early as possible in the spring. So it has the longest possible time to get established before the really cold weather sets in. And mulch. You're definitely going to want to have a good layer of mulch on that. And if you can, site it in a protected spot where it's going to be, you know, protected from the worst of the weather, whether that means you're covering it or you have a sort of microclimate in your yard. But you can do it where there's a will, there's a way. And as our listeners hopefully know, we always encourage experimentation when it comes to gardening.
Love it. Endorse it. Sold.
So check us out at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com to see all of the information about Just Chill Red Tip Camellia. And just chill a moment while we take a little break. And when we come back, we've got the Gardener Mailbag. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. It's the time where we help you with your gardening questions, conundrums, quandaries, whatever is on your mind. And I know at this time of year, people aren't so much thinking about gardening. They're like, geez, the holidays aren't even over. I haven't started thinking about gardening. But once that, you know, calendar flips over to January 2nd, it seems like everyone's mind turns to spring.
Yeah, what did I say? 80 hours, 80 days, 11 hours, 7. Yeah,
but who's counting?
Yeah,
Rick
who's
is.
counting? All right.
Rick is definitely counting. But, you know, people start to wonder what something happened last year. So we always welcome your questions. You can reach us at help, H-E-L-P, at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, or just visit that website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. And leave us a question in the contact form. That's also where you can share your resolutions with us so we can share them with everyone next week. So please don't hesitate to do that. And while you're there, if you have a question, go ahead and ask it, and like these people did.
Yeah, Jeanette. Thanks, Jeanette. Jeanette writes to us saying, being a backyard birder, avid gardener, I would love to learn more about the shrubs and plants that support bird populations. Thank you for lobbing us a softball. That's fantastic. I love it. Not only in the areas of nesting and food sourcing, but especially what plants support insects that native birds like chickadees need to feed their young. Great question, Jeanette. This is something I'd never considered, would love to learn more about. Please consider also doing a show on the topic, which is, fabulous.
Yeah, I think we could, because there's so much to say. And, you know, we don't have a lot of time to get fully in depth with these questions. So that's why I always try to leave links and other helpful information on the show notes. But Jeanette, to answer your question, you know, when you plant anything in your yard, you are planting habitat. You are planting a place where insects and fungus and all of these different things can grow and proliferate. And that, you know, fundamentally changes what's in your yard. But you are correct, Jeanette. There are plants that are certainly better than others for encouraging wildlife and encouraging the conditions for native birds to thrive. Now, I will say, if anybody has ever read any of Doug Tallamy's books or seen him speak, the number one thing that he will tell you that you should do to plant, to support birds, and especially chickadees, is plant oaks. Oaks host more insects than any other tree in North America. And those insects are so crucial for birds and everything else. Now, that said, planting an oak is easier said than done, because not all of us have space for an oak. I would, for example, I'd love to plant a white oak and leave my legacy that way, but a white oak is an extremely large tree. So that's not really feasible, but there are some smaller oaks. And, you know, you can also just, you know, hopefully have street trees that are oaks nearby, and just make sure that those aren't being sprayed. But I think when it comes to shrubs, shrubs are so great for birds because they provide so much shelter, and a close proximity. What I have found in my yard, really close proximity to the feeder, so they can feed and then they can go and rest in a shrub where they feel more protected, and then come out and bathe and eat or whatever. And they really sort of seem to appreciate that close distance. So I would also say a mix of evergreens and deciduous plants is really crucial to supporting bird life, because, that they like both. I've seen birds, really take advantage of the deciduous plants where they feel like they can have a good lookout all around and feel safe, as well as nestling deep into my junipers, which are basically impenetrable. And if you don't see the bird go in there, you wouldn't even know it was in there till you scare it out and it scares you back in return. So, Jeanette, I'm not trying to dodge the question here and not give you specifics, because really the answer is that if you are planting any kind of shrub, tree, or perennial, you are improving the habitat and the options for native birds. But I think also, to really do this question justice, everybody needs to kind of have a sea change in their mind of what it means to see insects on your plants, because people freak out. Oh my gosh, something's eating this. And the truth is that, those insects are what are going to attract the birds. The birds are going to manage them. And the plants can almost always withstand some insect damage. It might not look the best to your eye, but that is, there's a meme that sometimes goes around like, if your garden isn't being eaten, that means it's not part of the ecosystem. And I think that that's a really good way to think about it. So I think, Jeanette, I will put some suggestions, of course. I'll link to some suggestions that you can look for specifically. But, I would just encourage you to really plant by the conditions in your yard. Look for native species where you can. But, again, consider your soil, the light exposure. That's what's really important, is getting plants that will thrive. And if you have shrubs and perennials and trees that are thriving, that will always make sure that the birds in turn thrive.
Yeah, diversity. Of course, fruiting plants. My go-to always is flowering crabs, dogwoods, viburnums, that sort of thing. But you mentioned the insects. Trees that have furrowed bark. I find birds love them because the insects like to hide in that furrowed bark. And someday on a show, I want to talk about this. I know a gal who's a designer and is really very much into this, and that is stumperies.
Ooh, yeah.
Stumperies. So old dead trees, and as opposed to taking them out, leaving them in place.
Yeah, that's
and
so
moss
crucial.
grows, et cetera, et cetera. So at some point, we should probably talk about stumperies also.
I bet you have some puns related to that.
Oh, yes. That gets my stump of approval. All right.
I do want to just say quickly, I'm glad that you mentioned the flowering crabapple.
Yeah.
Such a great plant. Beautiful for people, beautiful for birds. And, a lot of people in spring, their crabapples will get webworm tent caterpillars.
Yes.
And people freak out. But you don't need to freak out because the birds will happily take care of them for you if you just rip that nest apart.
Yep.
So they can't get to it when they're all enclosed in their little tent. But if you take a stick and you just rip that web apart, the birds are going to come descending on that and easily take care of that. And you won't have to worry about it. And then, the flowers support a ton of pollinators when they're in bloom. And then, of course, the fruit in turn, if it's not eaten by early winter, it will be eaten later in the winter when it starts to ferment. And then you get, if you're lucky, the amazing show of some cedar waxwings having a little bender on your crabapple tree.
It's a jailbreak on those tent caterpillars. And if you can't reach it with a stick, I will use a garden hose with a good blast nozzle and bust it open that way too. So, all right, John writes to us, I'm considering fertilizing this fall. Several of the perennials that I've had in my yard for at least 5 years or much longer, I'm considering using a product readily available called Hollytone. I usually only fertilize with Hollytone in the spring. Would it be beneficial to fertilize in fall also? And yeah, I'm very familiar with Hollytone or all the tone products, and I do endorse them. Generally, I'll use Garden Tone on my perennials, but great product.
Yeah, I love the tones as well. It's what we used when I was in horticulture school at the New York Botanical Garden. And if it's good enough for the New York Botanical Garden, it's definitely good for us as well. Now, I will say a lot of people naturally gravitate towards Hollytone for all sorts of plants, but I generally discourage the use of Hollytone specifically unless you know your soil needs acidification, because it does contain sulfur and it will acidify your soil. And if you don't know that your soil needs acidifying, you could just be pushing, the pH level even further, and it doesn't really need to be there. It's just kind of like applying something that may not have a benefit. So unless you know you need that, I would encourage Garden Tone. I love Rose Tone, which is formulated for roses as a general purpose, flowering shrub and perennial fertilizer. There's Flower Tone. But I did want to answer John's question in that I generally recommend waiting until late winter or early spring to put down that fertilizer. Because what's going to happen is for the nutrients in a fertilizer to become available to a plant, they need to weather, or they need to have, rain and soil and wind and all of that stuff acting on those fertilizer granules for those nutrients to come apart from those bonds and go into the soil for the plant to take up. Now, if you apply in fall, that weathering is going to start sooner, and then that stuff's just going to be sitting around and the plant can't really take it up or do much with it while it's dormant. Now, that weathering process does not take 3 months. Some of it, will weather at a more slow rate, but I don't like to just risk having those nutrients weathering and going into the soil when they can't be used. That increases the potential for runoff. So I like to apply it, ideally sort of around the end of, middle to end of March for us here in Michigan, when the ground is just starting to thaw. It's still really wet, but you're not really getting have heavy snow load or anything like that. And at that point, that wet soil is going to help it to weather and become available to the plant, and you won't have to worry about it sitting around and getting wasted.
So there you go, John. Try garden tone, rose tone, flower tone. Just avoid dial tone, because your plant will hang up on you.
That's right. Now, John, if it's too late and you already put this stuff down for fall, don't sweat it. But in the future, I would recommend switching to one of the other tones, unless you need an acid soil, and putting it down in that late winter time frame instead. So thank you all for your questions. We hope to hear from you at Gardening Simplified on air. If you have a question right now, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, Rick has branching news. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. It's time for branching news. And Stacey, of course, this time of the year, New Year's, people resolve to get fit. And I wondered if it applied to gardening also, because I was reading this study that said 85% of people reported that having cool-looking gym clothes gave them more confidence, while 79% said that feeling like their gym clothes looked cool actually helped them physically perform better as well.
Well, I don't care about being cool, and that's what makes me cool. No, I'm just kidding. I would say if you've been to a gym lately, that definitely tracks, because
it does.
The gym gear, it's more of like a scene.
See, and that's the point. So same thing in the garden. If you got really cool gardening clothes, will it make you a better gardener or make you more confident? And you're right. I was at the gym. I saw this lady with a shirt. It's her shirt printed on the front. It says, "I was sad. Then I ordered some new gym clothes online. I'm okay now."
Wow.
Exercise? I thought I heard extra fries. So anyhow, people really feel, as it relates to getting in shape in the gym, that the clothes are very important. So let's translate that to the garden. Maybe if you got a cool garden hat, comfortable pants, great shoes, make you a better gardener.
Well, the problem is that no one sees you when you garden, unless you're gardening in the front yard. And then no one can appreciate your cool gardening clothes. I mean, with the gym, you get to show off. Everyone sees how cool you are, how much money you spent. Whereas in the garden, they might not see that. So for a lot of people, that just wouldn't be worth it.
I don't know. Vegetables exercise. You ever hear of a muscle sprout?
I hear the potatoes have eyes.
See? There we go. So we nailed it. Okay. Resolutions for the new year. Word of the day, aplomb. Aplomb. So A-P-L-O-M-B. Aplomb means complete and confident composure or self-assurance.
Yes, I used this word once, and a bunch of people asked me what it meant.
Yeah.
But it's from a ballet move.
Is it really?
Yes. It means when you're on your point. Yeah.
Okay.
So
good.
I like that word.
So it's kind of like fake it until you make it. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
well,
cool.
no, it means you do it well. You don't fake it. You can't fake standing on point. You have to do it perfectly.
Got it. All right. NASA gives us an update on long lost space tomatoes. Oh, let's catch up on the news here. NASA offered an update on the 2 tomatoes that were lost for 8 months. I didn't know there were 2 tomatoes lost. This is on the International Space Station and offered the first look at the dehydrated fruit. So essentially what happened here is they brought some tomatoes onto the International Space Station and they went missing. And actually some claimed or were blaming astronaut Frank Rubio But he said, no, I didn't eat them. I don't know where. And then all of a sudden they showed up and they're squished and dehydrated, but they showed no visible signs of microbial or fungal growth despite the high humidity aboard the station. So
wait, why did they blame Frank? What did Frank do?
They thought he ate them.
He got the blame for the tomatoes.
They thought he ate it. He got hungry in space. I don't know. To fix it, they will need tomato paste. So there you go.
Did you hear about the astronaut who smuggled the gorilla suit on board? And I know this sounds like a joke. It's not. You can watch a video of it. An astronaut smuggled a gorilla suit on board without any of his shipmates knowing about it. Wow. And then he put it on. And then he chased the crew around. So you can watch a video of it. I'm not making this up. It's not breaking news. It's not branching news. It's old news. But speaking of the space shuttle, so, you know.
Yeah, and I feel bad for Frank Rubio.
I know.
Also.
Sorry. Apologies to I think Frank is owed an apology.
I mean, if he ate the tomatoes or stole them, yes, he could be just like a tomato and get canned. But he's in the clear now, and they found the dehydrated tomatoes.
Oh, good.
Tucson, Arizona. An Arizona woman got a huge shock when surveillance footage showed the thief who stole her backyard cameras was a four-legged and fluffy-tailed animal. It was a fox. So this is interesting. She has videos that document the entire heist carried out by a gray fox.
That's so cool.
Yeah, grabbed the cameras, ran with them, probably stuck them in the ground somewhere or in a tree, and I don't know why this fox had interest in these cameras. So I don't know. They could make a movie about it, but it bombed at the Fox office. What happens to the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree after the holidays? Rockefeller Center usually selects a Norway spruce as its holiday showstopper. Once the trees come down, the trunks are milled into 2x4 and 2x6 beams that they donate to Habitat for Humanity.
Oh, interesting.
I like that. It's a great story. So these are used for, they don't use them for load bearing, but they use them for blocking, filling, spacing, joining, reinforcing frames, flooring, furniture, and cabinetry. So the lumber from the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree is used to help build Habitat homes. That's just a great story. Lexington, Kentucky. Kentucky family got a little something extra when they picked out their Christmas tree this year, a baby owl. But here's the interesting thing. I'll just paraphrase the story here. This family's got 3 dogs, and the dogs are in the living room around the tree, the family's around, and that type of thing, and they never saw the owl. Never realized this owl was in the tree until they called for service. There was a serviceman who came to the magic carpet cleaning.
Yeah, carpet cleaning, yep.
And this guy recognized that there was a baby owl in the tree.
Well, so it wasn't a baby owl. The article said it was a baby owl, but it was just a screech owl, and screech owls are very tiny. So, you know, I think that newspapers need a little fact checking here. It was not a baby. But I will say this about this story. I am so jealous.
Yeah.
I am so jealous. I wish this would happen to me.
They are adorable. They're so cute.
They are. Screech owls are very cool. Now, obviously, the poor thing was scared out of its wits, so it wasn't doing its trademark screech.
Right. He wanted to be owl by himself.
But the article is very funny when you read about the carpet cleaning guy, you know, seeing the movement, and then he looks in and the poor owl starts trying to flee. But yeah, I'm sure the dog scared it, so it was pretty paralyzed. But it's very common for owls to roost in evergreens. Yeah. And so whether it happened at the farm before the tree was harvested or while it was waiting to be sold, it's classic owl behavior. So I'm just glad it had a happy ending.
It did. Excellent. Yeah, and I'd like to have something like that happen to me too. It would be cool. And here's a final story. Fastest time to assemble a Mr. Potato Head. You remember Mr. Potato Head?
I do, yes.
This guy, Andre Ortolf, a serial world record breaker with more than 100 titles to his name, puts on a blindfold and starts with a fully disassembled Mr. Potato Head toy, and he gets the thing put together in 12.11 seconds. Wow. Blindfolded.
Well, there's a resolution for someone if they were still looking for one. Just
practice.
Yeah, practice.
Practice makes perfect. Yes. Wow, that's interesting.
That's a rare talent.
12.11 seconds. Who would even think to do that? It's just amazing to me. So very cool. All right. Anyhow, we want your resolutions, and we'll share your submitted resolutions on our next show. And send them to us. Email us. Go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, our Instagram page, or also YouTube. And, you can make comments on our show. Watch it on YouTube, and we'd love to hear your resolutions.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very curious about what gardening resolutions everyone has.
Me too. I also want to hear if anybody else is like me and has a messy garden shed. Well, I'll tell you what. Remember to enjoy your New Year's Eve. Be safe, whatever you do. And remember, if you think the best New Year's Eve is only in New York, you're wrong. They drop the ball every year, right?
That's true, yes.
Have a happy New Year, Stacey.
And to you, and to Adriana, and to all of you.